Welcome to the Discovery Pod, where we talk to leading experts from the University of Adelaide about solutions to society's most pressing challenges. Cybercrime and digital warfare. How do we get tech savvy to secure our lives online? Today, I'm joined by Yuval Yoram, Senior Lecturer and expert in creating trustworthy computer systems, and Russell Brewer, Senior Lecturer in Criminology and Investigator with the Digital Youth Research Lab. Hi.
Hi. Hello.
The technology around us is continuing to evolve, and now, more than ever, the way we behave online can have drastic consequences. So who can we trust online, and how do we prevent our information falling into the wrong hands in this brave new digital world? Can we do more to prevent cybercrime? And for those of us with kids, how do we protect their online lives? So Yuval, maybe we can start with you. So how is our technology evolving, and do we really need cybersecurity?
Well, everyone knows now that we're working on the internet. We are moving our information online. We are handling our banking online. We are handling our education online these days. Everything is moving online. People even are talking about the possibility of moving elections online. And
Donald Trump doesn't support that, though, anyway.
He probably might. And once we move that information online, we are exposing it to the risks that come with that. And these are the fact that we don't really know who we are communicating with. That's one side. And the other side is that we don't know how to build or how to secure this information online. It's just a new paradigm, and we have not built the hundreds of years of experience of protecting this information.
So it's that trust element online that really we haven't evolved the trust systems to validate those online systems.
It's trust is one important part of that. Even the question of identity, who are we talking with online? We don't know.
Yeah. And so, and some of your work is looking at some of the computer systems and some of the potential flaws with the computer systems and how that relates to security. Tell us a bit about that.
So the way that we try to build security into computer software and hardware is we try to maintain some capsules around information. And
so protective capsules.
Protective capsules,
yeah.
Yes.
It's a nice way to think about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And to be able to isolate, we build the computer systems as layers of hardware, and then on top of that, operating system and software and more advanced software. And each of these layers relies on the layers underneath it. And in my work, I investigate the capability of the hardware itself, so of the CPU or the processor inside the computer, to maintain this isolation that it promises us to maintain.
So it's the kind of architecture of the computer, and it's able to keep separate these different information protective bubbles that are floating around.
Indeed, exactly that.
Yeah. And so this is with laptops and with mainframes. You work with all systems.
It's well, the flaws that we have discovered are in possibly every mainstream processor designed in the last 20 years.
So you're kind of you're a reverse hacker then, are you? You're kind of trying to identify where the flaws occur within these systems so that hacking can't penetrate them.
Yeah, we tend to call that white hat.
Oh, white hat, okay. So you're a white hatter, yeah. And you're working with some major computer companies for these systems?
So when we find problems, we disclose them to the vendors. The main one I'm currently working with is Intel, particularly because their systems are more accessible, and so we have experience with those.
Yeah. And they'll have their own departments, I guess, as well, and their own people to find these, but really to be tested externally, and it is very important, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. And do you tend to find that computer companies take on board some of the findings that you have and then change their systems?
Experience varies. Most of the big vendors are really good at that. So they do take information on board, they do try to fix, or they do fix. And
Yeah.
in some cases, it's a long process. So Intel cannot replace the contents of a chip that is in people's computer, but next generation will be better.
So what do we do about it so that we don't get exposed to old technology that you're able to hack? Do we need to buy new phones and new computers every 3 months? What do we do?
Well, we have fixes that are able to protect people, even at software. So there is no necessity to replace computers every 3 months. But there is a necessity to update the software to make sure that it is secure, because security vulnerabilities keep being discovered. This is something that happens in software in general, so there is nothing special that needs to be done because of the things that we discover, at least not at the level of the everyday protection. Companies, software developers, yes, they need to address that, but the average person just need to keep the same behavior.
Just have to, so when it pops up and says you've got to update your computer system, update your software, you just have to say yes and do that. I mean, it's a bit like, so I'm trained in evolutionary biology, and we have this principle called the Red Queen effect. So from Alice in Wonderland, the Red Queen was constantly running to keep up. And it's given as an analogy to systems between predators and prey. So prey may get a new system to be able to outrun the predator, and then the predator develops a new system or new evolution to be able to pursue the prey. I mean, it's exactly this issue in computers between the hackers and then the information holders, that is this constant play between the sophistication on the two sides, isn't it?
It is. Well, when defense systems get more advanced, attackers improve and vice versa. So yes, continue this arms race.
Yeah, so it's never going to stop. We're going to keep evolving and changing those systems because there will always be some kind of flaw. But the important thing is that we're able to keep ahead of that to prevent that hacking.
We need to continue. We need to keep ahead. I don't see a fix for the issue, or there is no magic bullet that will fix this in the near foreseeable future. We tend to think that we are getting better. We are much more secure than we were 20 years ago. The flip side is that the information that we have online is much more valuable than it were 20 years ago. So people invest more in getting access to it, and so
yeah,
basically we are the Red Queen running to keep in the same place.
But now the stakes are even higher, and then you've got to remember all those passwords. So and you have so many passwords. Some people have a file with their passwords on, which surely defeats the purpose.
Not necessarily. It's that's what I do.
Yeah.
It is probably the much better than having the same password everywhere.
Oh, okay. So I shouldn't do that. Okay, yeah. And what about fingerprints or some other kind of biometric system that may be used? How secure are those?
Well, they have their different issues. So everything that we do is improving things. Biometric have one main issues that exist with biometric identification is that if your password leaks, you can change it. If your fingerprint leaks, then you're stuck with it.
Okay.
And then
I guess you got 10 fingers.
Yeah, and fingerprints do leak. So there was the case of I think it was a German minister that from a photo online, someone managed to recover the fingerprint.
Wow. Okay.
So it can be done.
So a good password, secure password, not the same password for every system, so varying those, but keeping track of that and the changing dynamic is always going to be a problem, isn't it?
It's always going to be a problem.
We're all human and forget things.
So there is a move online to try to reduce the number of passwords. When we use Facebook to identify us to other websites, we only need one password for Facebook. But then we have to trust Facebook.
Yeah, and therein the problem lies.
And, well, Facebook or anyone else, actually, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Great. So look, we talked about Facebook. Russell, maybe we can talk a little bit about some of the problems with youth online. We all moan about our kids spending too much time on screen time, and there's not getting out and playing outside. And that's a perennial kind of issue. It's probably around before computers and TV and stuff. But what are some of the other kind of more critical problems that youths face in this kind of brave new world online?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, when we think about young people online, we often categorize them, when we hear about them in the media or even in research, we think about young people as potential victims of crime, as being potentially vulnerable to various nefarious activities online. And we don't necessarily, unless you go into a school and talk to a teacher, we don't necessarily hear about or think about young people as perpetrators of crime. So I think it's very important to look at both sides of the coin. And the reality is that we don't really know a lot about the factors that are driving different types of behavior, whether or not it's factors that might lead them to be young people to be victimized, or really anybody to be victimized, or the drivers that might lead young people to be perpetrators of particular types of crime, or various forms of cyber deviance. So I think...
Hang on a minute, Russell, I'm going to have to... Cyber deviance, what is that?
So when I use the term cyber deviance, I'm thinking about, again, that people as perpetrators, or young people as perpetrators of crime online, right? And I mean, when we talk about cybercrime, we're actually thinking about two different types of crime, that being cyber-dependent crime or cyber-enabled crime, right? So these are either crimes that can occur through the use of a computer only, something like hacking, or something that is facilitated by a computer, right? So cyberbullying, kids have been bullying kids for as long as there were kids, right? But now the internet, or digital devices, digital communication devices, change the way in which we interact as humans, can augment and amplify the ways in which that we interact as humans. And that can transcend into a delinquent or deviant context. So when I talk about cyber deviance, I'm thinking about a wide range of activities, what you might think of when you think about cybercrime, hacking, but things like bullying, harassment, stalking, engaging in various forms of cyber hate, cyber violence, engaging in sexual activities online, sexual exploration, deception, fraud, and a wide range of different other activities that young people might engage in.
So all of these activities which you tend to go through as you're growing up, they've moved on to the online kind of forum.
Absolutely.
So your work kind of explores this, or is your work also looking at some of the solutions?
Yeah, look, so we're at the kind of coalface, at the tail end of it, what we're actually interested in is trying to think about effective interventions. So if we think about young people engaging in various forms of cyber delinquency, how can we prevent, how can we intervene, how can we reduce the impact or reduce the rate at which young people engage in various types of delinquent activities. Now the only way the reality is such is that the evidence base for most of the strategies that are out there right now, we don't actually know if they work or not. There is no evidence base, that we're kind of throwing things against the wall
because it's
and
so
we're seeing
new.
if they stink. It's
so many new problems. We haven't really had this problem before, so we're not sure what works. So we bring old tech to a new tech problem.
Exactly. And there's a lot of trial and error. Yeah. And what we are doing is we're taking a step back and we're looking at the factors, the various risk factors that might drive engagement in a wide range of different types of behavior. And then we are starting to think about developing interventions that target those risk factors specifically, right? So it's not just a matter of throwing everything against the wall and see what sticks, but it's actually creating targeted approaches that you need to attend to cyberbullying different than you attend to hacking, than you attend to fraud and deception, than you attend to image-based abuse or sexting. So these activities you need to be tailor-made to specific types of risk factors. And that's what our research is exploring, that, well, different types of cyber deviants have different forms of risk factors that are driving them.
So maybe give us a bit of an example of how you would deal with hacking versus cyberbullying, for example.
That's a good question. So look, one of the things that we're particularly interested in our research is mapping the progression into and out of various forms of cyber delinquency over a period of time. We know that young people don't just become hackers, or they don't just start bullying using technology, that you might have at the beginning more of a timid encounter, that you might test the waters, as you're testing the waters, you may see, you will see that some young people tend to escalate in their activities very quickly, some do so much more slowly or gradually, some test the waters, pull back, de-escalate, and never engage in those sorts of activities again. So it's also about mapping those different trajectories, and we see that you have different classes of young people that engage in a wide variety of offending, in different types of offending, or then you've got abstainers as well who barely ever engage in different types of activities as well. So look, it's very early days, very, very early days. I mean, the longitudinal study that we're running across South Australia right now is actually the first longitudinal study of young people in the world that's starting to unpack these different risk factors. So we're really, literally last week, we're just starting to pull out some of the different risk factors and seeing that there are differences between, hackers and those engaging in sexting or image-based abuse, that some may relate to different forms of behavioral functioning, others are more associated with different demographic characteristics. The links between how people use their technology and different forms of cyber offending or cyber deviance are particularly strong. So the extent to which young people are engaging in a wide range of, we call them routine tasks, the everyday tasks, the Googling, or social tasks, messaging one another, sharing photos, sharing videos, text messaging, or more specialized tasks like sharing files online, browsing web forums, using anonymization software like Tor, that the types of things that young people do online are strongly associated with different types of activities or cyber delinquency or deviance.
And I guess those the behaviours that you see, I mean, you're a criminologist by background. Those types of behaviours you would see in any kind of criminal or subversive activity. It's being moved online through the online tools, and the problem is that this is often new technology. Parents may not have a particularly sophisticated understanding in that context, so some of this activity can go undetected for long periods of time.
One of the most interesting findings we found to date is the overlap between online deviance and offline deviance. Right? So
does it translate?
Well, what we know is the vast, in fact, almost all young people who engage in physical deviance, so real-world deviance, engage in cyber deviance as well.
Okay. So bullying on and offline, you would bully.
But what we know is there's a much wider cohort of young people who engage in cyber deviance, but not in physical deviance. So the pie has grown considerably.
So why is that? Is it potentially because you can get away with it online?
Well, look, what we argue in our research is that the internet and digital technologies, it makes it easy, right? That we have got this magic device in our pocket that we can suddenly do whatever we want. It's always going off, that we can Google whatever we want. It's never been easier to access resources that might assist us in various areas. These tools can be used to augment and amplify real-world situations, right? Previously, in order to bully somebody, I might have to be in the same classroom, or I might need to be in the playground with them. Whereas now I can do it from, particularly relevant in this pandemic, that I can sit in the comfort of my own home. I could be sitting at the dinner table with my parents and bullying somebody using my technology. So suddenly the technology can amplify and augment what we're doing online. Then we've got the issue of the technology is actually pushing information to us. You know, this notion that engagement in cyber deviance, it might not be purposeful, right? That in fact, these platforms are pushing information at us, you know, in terms of as we're scrolling through a Facebook feed or a TikTok feed. You know, these feeds are dynamic. They're changing. They are changing on the basis of what I have watched previously, right? So if I watch, for example, I stop scrolling on a video that might be construed as violent, you know, the algorithms may decide that, okay, well, you know, we want to keep these eyeballs on the screen. They're going to feed me much more of the same. What are my friends watching? You know, imagine what your feed would look like if you were a 13, 14-year-old boy, right? And that these
don't really want to think
systems are pushing that information to you. So we actually suggest that a lot of engagement or the onset is actually unpredictable, that these platforms, these systems are nudging individuals, young people in particular directions.
Because they're feeding back and feeding back content that may have just been started out as a bit of an exploration or a bit of interest, and then that's the only information that's coming
it's
through.
part of the adolescent condition, right?
Yeah,
I mean, risk taking is and negotiating your place in the world, exploring yourself sexually, et cetera, et cetera. These are all part and parcel with our adolescent development. So, you know, having a phone in your pocket can really change the game. And it's just another mechanism for which young people can explore that development. But again, it makes it easy to cross that line, to cross that threshold, and potentially engage in something that maybe you shouldn't have, and to amplify that experience.
And normalise it a little bit as well. So you know, we've talked a bit about the problems. What can we do about it? What kind of systems are in place to help young people find a healthy way through that kind of exploration phase of life, which I'm sure we've all been through, and then into a kind of this is more normal. This is a part of how you grow up and move on. The problem is that you could become fixed in some of these exploration phases. So how do we cope with that? How do we prevent or manage that?
This is not a very exciting answer, unfortunately.
That's right.
But what we need to do is we need to, after we've understood what these risk factors are, we need to design, and then we have design interventions, and then we need to evaluate them longitudinally.
So again, it's still quite new, so we don't really necessarily have solutions.
I mean, at this point, we're in wave 3 of a 5-wave research project.
And this is the big project that you talked about.
This is a big project across South Australian high schools where we are, or secondary schools, where we are mapping what young people are doing online and how they use their technologies, and again, what various forms of cyber deviance that they might be engaging with. And we're interested in measuring changes or changing risk profiles over time. We're mapping this across a variety of vectors, that being both the variety of different activities that young people are engaging in, or various forms of cyber deviance, but also the frequency at which they're engaging in it as well, right? So I might engage in hacking once over the course of the past year in year 1, but in year 2 I might engage in a variety of forms of hacking, or I might do that single activity more frequently. So that would denote a form of escalation. So we're interested in identifying, you know, what are the factors that are driving escalation, but also what are the factors that are driving de-escalation and desistance. So that is stopping the activity entirely. Well, so onset, escalation, de-escalation, and desistance is what we're interested in. And once we start to identify what those factors are that are driving these behaviors, then we can start to design interventions and implement those interventions through using experimental methodologies. And you can do that as these can be interventions that we deploy across, they could be public advertising campaigns that you deploy widely across the populace. They could be more targeted, so you identify young people who exhibit particular risk factors and target them specifically. Then you need to run these interventions, and then you have to evaluate these interventions to determine the immediate benefits, the short-term benefits, you know, so 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and then the long-term, what kind of benefits persist beyond 2 years. And in fact, most evaluations, you know, if you're going to measure something for 2 years, you actually have to conduct that research for many, many, many years, right?
Yep.
At least 2 years, right? So we need to identify, we need to develop and identify interventions that persist over a long period of time to determine whether or not they work or not.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Yep.
that work simply hasn't been done. So in fact, some of my PhD students in my lab are specifically designing interventions around cyberbullying, that she's starting to unpack some of the risk factors that are associated with cyberbullying, and now she's starting to think about different interventions that can target those specific risk factors, address them, and then implement and measure the effects over a long period of time. And that's the kind of work, it's not necessarily the sexiest of work, but it is the most effective way to make a meaningful impact.
And I guess we've got strategies to deal with bullying. The first stage is to recognise that it's happening and understanding that it's happening, and then deal with it through this, you know, the school and home situation. So, you know, we do have those systems, but I guess your research is then looking at how do we prevent the amplification of that
Yep.
through kind of online algorithms and the such.
And are they the
Yeah.
same people that are engaging?
Yeah.
Right? That
Yep.
and in fact, we would argue that they're not. That you've got a wider cohort of young people who are engaging in cyberbullying that did not necessarily engage in more physical forms of bullying.
So another question that comes up, you know, we hear a lot about fake news and those kind of issues, but really online, you know, who do we trust with our information, and where do we get trusted information from? So, you know, we talked a bit, Yuval, around trust and the trust things, I guess, with online as well, that lack of the kind of trust network and framework allows some of these activities to go unchecked. But, you know, we're able to get a broad range of information, you know, and we might be served up with information that comes from the ABC that might be a trusted source in some aspects, and then that might be presented alongside information that's coming from, you know, the Flat Earth Society or something like that. So where do we go to for trusted information?
I wish I had an answer to that. I hope that the information I get is trustworthy. So this is really one of the problems that we're facing. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah. And Russell, where would you go for trusted information?
Gosh, that's a challenging question. I mean, there are obviously reputable news sources which we trust that will provide, depending on your preferences, will be consistent with your worldview.
You're probably
it's
still
hard
going to
say.
choose
It's
those
hard to
sources.
say.
Yeah, that's
You're
right.
probably still going to choose those sources,
Yeah.
and it's really hard to say that you don't believe what you see online. It's very easy to manipulate videos and images and text and websites, and you need to be careful and you need to be vigilant. And don't believe what you read when you click on a link is what I would suggest. In the same way that, you know, don't believe everything that you see on TV, right? But I think on the internet you need to be even more vigilant.
So I've got to be careful of web naivety and overcome that. So I have a final question for you both. So for students that are potentially coming into university and starting a university career, where are the kind of horizons of research and investigation and study that will be coming up in 3 to 5 years? So where do you think this area is going to go to, and where do you think those kind of future challenges or kind of horizon work, where's that going to be at?
I mean, in terms of, I think that this is such an exciting and interesting domain of study. To use a baseball reference, we're in the bottom of the very first inning in terms of understanding why individuals commit cybercrime, why individuals are victims of cybercrime. And one thing that I think the social sciences and computer science has done quite poorly to date is actually work together. So what we're seeing more integration between the STEM and the social sciences, which are leading to a wide variety of really interesting and innovative research projects that are starting to tackle some of the most pernicious problems of our time. The internet has again made it easy to engage in a wide variety, amplified and extended a wide variety of different and serious criminal activities, less serious forms of adolescent delinquency, more serious forms of delinquency and deviance, full stop. So I think that there are, and this is an area that is changing very, very quickly, and it requires serious attention, and it's receiving some pretty serious attention from governments around the world. They're starting to take notice, and there's a lot of investment in these areas, and as a consequence, there is a lot of scope for some really good, innovative, and novel research to be undertaken.
Yeah.
It's interesting. For the technical side, it's basically the same answer. We have been trying to secure systems for many years, and we are still learning how to do that. So how do we create environments where programmers do not need to know the rules for creating secure programs, but the environment ensures that the programs they create are secure? And we are moving ahead, but that's an area that will continue to develop for the near future, definitely.
Yeah. It was okay when we were just social or just technology, but it's the collision between the social and the technology. So, social technology that's coming up. Well, thanks for a fascinating discussion, and thanks for being on the Discovery Pod.
Thank you very much
for having us.
Thanks for listening to the Discovery Pod, brought to you by the University of Adelaide. Join us next time when we discuss genetically modified foods.